Hello and welcome to the second section of Volume 3, connecting to your Horizon View desktop. So what are you going to learn in this section? We're going to start by walking through all of the available Horizon Client options. The Horizon Client is, as the name suggests, the software client that runs on the end user's device and allows them to connect to their virtual desktop machine. As well as the client software, we'll also look at how an end user can connect to their virtual desktop using a browser. As part of this discussion, we'll also install the Horizon Windows client and connect to one of the virtual desktops in the example lab environment, as well as connect using a browser. Once connected, there is one final piece of configuration work that we're going to look at, and that's how to fine-tune the virtual desktop experience for the end users and how we then monitor and manage that experience going forward to ensure that the end user always receives the best experience possible. So let's get started and take a look at the Horizon clients that are available and also some of the other ways a user can connect to their virtual desktop machine. We're going to start by looking at the different Horizon client software options, before then looking at some of the hardware-based options such as thin clients and zero clients. Finally, in this section, we're going to download and install the Horizon client for Windows, and once installed, we will connect to one of the virtual desktop machines that we created back in Volume 2. We'll also look at how to connect to a virtual desktop machine using a browser. So the first client we're going to look at is for iOS. The Horizon client for iOS allows you to access your Windows virtual desktop from an iOS-based device, such as an iPhone or an iPad. With the latest version of the client, version 4.3, there are a number of new features, such as iOS 10 support, mobile standby mode, where a user moves the Horizon client to the background, transmission of both audio and video is paused, preventing using battery or bandwidth when the session is not visible. And finally, real-time audio support for session-based desktops when using Windows Server 2016. If you look at the example screenshots displayed, on the first screen, you can see the login to the Horizon connection servers. The second screen shows the entitled desktop pools available to the end user, and the final screen shows the end user connected to a Windows desktop. You can also see on this screen the input options menu, allowing us to change settings and change mouse mode, as well as display the keyboard and much more. The Horizon client for the iPad and iPhone supports native iPad and iPhone gestures for quick and easy navigation around your desktop. The Unity Touch sidebar makes it easy to browse, search, open and close Windows applications and files and switch between running applications, all without using the Windows Start menu or taskbar. Unity Touch, on iOS 5 or later, supports full screen mode, iOS dictation, localization support and an enhanced presentation mode that allows you to use an external monitor or AirPlay in order to show your View desktop while your iPad or iPhone turns into a keyboard and touchpad. The Horizon client for iOS requires iOS version 8.4.1 and later, including iOS 9 and iOS 10. Next we have the Horizon client for Android-based devices, which again, as the name suggests, allows an end user to connect to their Windows virtual desktop machines and hosted applications from an Android tablet or Android smartphone device. The Android client software can be downloaded as an app from the Google Play Store. In the screen shown, you can see an example of the Horizon client for Android. You can see that the user is entitled to 2 virtual desktop machines, 2 RDS hosted desktop sessions, as well as a number of View hosted applications. The Horizon View client supports native Android gestures for quick and easy navigation around the desktop. When working on a Windows desktop, the full screen touchpad feature lets you touch anywhere on the screen to move the mouse pointer around the Windows virtual desktop. The Blast Extreme Unity Touch sidebar makes it easy to browse, search, open and close Windows applications and files, as well as switch between running applications, all without using the Windows Start menu or taskbar. In the following example screenshots, you can also see Microsoft PowerPoint and Adobe Reader running as View-hosted applications, alongside the Unity Touch feature, allowing you to easily run applications from the slide-in menu on the left. With the latest version of the client, version 4.3, there are a number of new features, including rich text format support for Google applications when you copy and paste data, mobile standby mode, Chromebook installation, an RSA SDK update, and real-time audio support for session-based desktops on Windows Server 2016. The Horizon client for Android requires the Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich or later operating system, and is supported with the latest maintenance release of View 5.3 and later releases. The Horizon client for macOS allows you to access your Windows virtual desktop machines and View hosted applications from an Apple Mac. With the latest version of the macOS client, version 4.3, there are a number of new features as follows. Support for Mac OS Sierra, real-time audio video, OpenSSL 1.0.2J support, multiple monitor support with H.264 hardware decoding. As well as the features just mentioned, the Mac OS client also supports the following features: RSI Secure ID, Single Sign-On, PC over IP Display Protocol, VMware Blast Extreme Display Protocol, the RDP Display Protocol, USB redirection, client drive redirection, virtual printing, location-based printing, and finally smart card support. When it comes to the supported Horizon View versions, the Horizon View client for Mac OS is supported with the latest maintenance release of Horizon View 5.3 and later, and can be downloaded from the Apple Store or the VMware client download page. The Horizon View client for Linux allows you to access your Windows virtual desktops and View hosted applications from a Linux-based device, and delivers the best possible user experience over a LAN or WAN connection. It also supports the following features: USB redirection on RDS hosted desktops, monitor detection when selecting multiple monitors, client drive redirection, and multiple monitor support with H.264 hardware decoding. The Horizon client for Linux 4.3 is supported on the following Linux operating systems when you use the VMware provided installer: Ubuntu 12.04 and 14.04, both 32-bit and 64-bit versions, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6.8, 32-bit and 64-bit versions, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7.2, 64-bit, SUSE Linux Enterprise Desktop 11, 32-bit, and CentOS 6.8, 32-bit. In terms of the supported Horizon View versions, the Horizon client for Linux is supported with the latest maintenance release of Horizon View 5.3, Horizon 6.0, 6.1, 6.2, and Horizon 7. The Horizon View client for Chrome OS allows you to access your Windows virtual desktop machines and View hosted applications from a device running the Chrome OS, such as a Chromebook. To run the Horizon client for the Chrome OS, you will need a Chromebook with Chrome OS stable channel and ARC version 41.4410.244.13 or later. When it comes to the supported Horizon View versions, the Horizon client for Chrome OS is supported with the latest maintenance release of Horizon View 5.3 and later, and can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or directly from the VMware client download page. One of the things we hear a lot from speaking with customers is that the endpoint device is kind of irrelevant when connecting to a virtual desktop machine, as it's just a dumb device to access the infrastructure and display my desktop screen. So that means I can buy the cheapest device possible and that will be fine, right? Well, the correct answer is that it depends on the use case for the users and what their requirements around features and functionality are. Then you can choose the most suitable endpoint device for them to connect from. The other confusion that seems to be out there is what the difference between a thin client and a zero client is, and whether there is actually a difference at all. In this section we're going to quickly cover the different types of hardware clients available and explain what each one is and the use case for which one is best to choose. So we start with thin clients. A thin client is a hardware endpoint device that's used to connect to the network and deliver a remote desktop and application session. Unlike a typical PC or FAT client that has the memory, storage and computing power to run applications all on its own, a thin client relies on the computing power of the servers in the data center to do all the processing. Typically, a client device will have just enough processing power and resources to access and use the computing resources of the server. They have little or no storage, just enough to host their own internal OS, and more importantly, no moving parts, which means they don't go wrong very often. Due to the reduced CPU and memory capacity, a thin client would draw a fraction of the power that a PC would normally need, meaning that thin clients should be cheaper to run and manage, as well as having longer life cycles. One thing they do have in common with a PC is an operating system. A thin client will have its own local operating system installed, typically embedded on a flash card, and will be running the vendor's own cut-down version of a Linux distribution, such as Dell Y's ThinOS or Microsoft Windows Embedded. In addition, it would be running the appropriate client software to connect to the appropriate virtual desktop infrastructure, such as a Horizon client with PC over IP to connect to VMware View-based virtual desktops and hosted apps, or the Citrix receiver to connect to Citrix-based infrastructure, and so on. Usually a thin client will have all the connection options installed, giving you the choice and flexibility to connect to the different types of infrastructure. Now, This is where you need to make the right choice of device, as the operating system will be embedded on the device. As mentioned previously, the use case for the user will typically dictate the type of device. For example, if you are going to deploy unified comms with Microsoft Skype for Business, then you will need a Windows embedded operating system, as it will more than likely require some of the multimedia functions of Windows. Always check before going off and buying the cheapest device first. There are also a couple of other points to bear in mind with thin clients. If the device is running on a local operating system, this will still need to be managed and maintained. The other consideration is around licensing, and the fact that you will need a Windows VDA license if you are connecting from a non-Windows device. This needs to be taken into account when looking at cost models and TCO and ROI. So let's take a look at zero clients. A zero client performs the same functionality as a thin client. However, instead of an operating system, a zero client will have a highly tuned onboard processor specifically designed for one of the VDI protocols, such as PC over IP, HDX, or Remote FX. For example, the VMware View-based zero clients would use the onboard Terra 2 hardware chipset, such as a Dell Wise 5030 or 7030, or a 10ZIG V1200P. These devices are still small, light, and have no moving parts, and still consume minimal power just like a thin client. Most of the decoding and display processes take place on dedicated hardware and are therefore more efficient and deliver better performance than using a software client and a standard CPU and GPU setup with a thin client. Zero clients have boot up speeds of just a few seconds and are immune to viruses, decreasing the overall downtime of the device and increasing the productivity to the end user. The zero client device requires very little maintenance and rarely needs an update unless there are significant changes or enhancements to the VDI protocols or the occasional BIOS related update. There are a couple of things to watch out for though. First is the licensing. As these devices are not running an operating system, you need to look at VDI licensing for using a non-Windows device. The final thing is that if you change your VDI infrastructure from say PC over IP to a new protocol, then the device is not going to be able to be used with that different protocol, so you lose the flexibility that you get with a thin client. However, you will gain much more in performance. The Horizon client for Windows allows you to access your Windows virtual desktops and view hosted applications from a Windows-based device and delivers the best possible experience over either a LAN or a WAN connection. Some of the new features include a single installer for both 32-bit and 64-bit systems, H.264 encoder for multiple monitors, nested mode enhancements, real-time audio video, Windows 10 LTSB version 1607 support, and multiple monitors supported with H.264 hardware decoding. The latest Horizon client, version 4.3, requires the following Windows operating systems: 32-bit or 64-bit Windows 10, versions Home, Pro, Enterprise, or Internet of Things Core, 32-bit or 64-bit Windows 8, 8.1, or 8.1 Pro, Enterprise, or Industry Embedded, 32-bit or 64-bit Windows 7 with Service Pack 1, versions Home, Enterprise, Ultimate, or Professional Edition, Windows Server 2012 with Service Pack 2, and Windows Server 2008. The Horizon client is supported with the latest releases of Horizon View 5.3, VMware Horizon 6, VMware Horizon 6.1 and 6.2, and also VMware Horizon 7. In the previous sections we have talked about either using a software-based or hardware-based client to access your virtual desktop from, but there's also a third method, and that's to use an HTML5 enabled browser on any device. The key use case for using this method is when installing client software on an endpoint device that's not possible. For example, you might have a bring your own device policy where end users don't want to install client software, or you might want to use a public facing endpoint in a hotel lobby, for example, where the device is locked down and you cannot install the client software. This is where this use case comes in, allowing you to access your virtual desktop machine using an HTML5 enabled web browser, which also requires no additional plugins or software to be downloaded and installed. The HTML desktop access is what is referred to as the VMware Blast Extreme protocol. To connect to your virtual desktop machine or view hosted application using the browser, simply open the browser and in the address bar type the address of your connection server. So for example, in the example lab environment, the address is https://hzn7-cs1.pvolab.com. Before you access your virtual desktop machine, you will first see a web page that displays two different options. You have the choice of downloading the full version of the Horizon client, or you can continue and connect via HTML. In the following video, we're going to install the Horizon client for Windows and then connect to one of the virtual desktop machines in the example lab environment. So now we've discussed the Horizon client options, we're going to take a look at some of them in this next video. So we finished off the last slide piece by talking about the browser client, and that's what we're going to show first. So here we have our client machine and our browser loaded, and we've pointed our browser at our connection server to the hzn7-cs1.pvolab.com. And here you can see there's two icons. First icon is for installing the VMware Horizon client, and the second icon is for the VMware Horizon HTML access. So let's have a look at the HTML access. Let's click on there first. And what that's going to do is communicate with our connection server, and then it's going to come back and ask us to enter our credentials for our user. So we're going to enter a user that's part of the sales OU, which was entitled to the Windows 10 desktops. And that user is called Bob Cooper, so we enter B Cooper and his password. And we ensure that the domain is the right domain, it's the PVOLab domain, and then we click Login. So now that's come back with the entitlement. So this is the pools that that particular user is entitled to. And if you remember, he's entitled to a Windows 10 desktop, and here it is. So if we click on the Windows 10 desktop, now we're going to go away, and it's now going to connect us as Bob Cooper to that Windows 10 desktop. So now he has his VDI Windows 10 desktop that he can go away and use and do all kinds of whatever he wants on his desktop. You'll also notice here there's this little tab on the left hand side. If we click that, we get a whole bunch of menu options for within the client. So here we can see that I'm running a Windows 10 desktop, there's Windows 10 available. Plus I have some other options, so I can send Control-Alt-Delete, I can open a file transfer panel, I can do cut and paste, and there's some other menu options there as well. So say I've finished now and I don't want to use my desktop anymore, I'm going to log off. I click on here and I click log off. And I get the message saying, do I want to log off my desktop? Yes, okay, I'm going to click OK. And now the desktop's logged off and I'm disconnected from that desktop. One thing to remember is the user is still connected to the connection server via the client. So in order to log off of there, when we do log out again. So if we do log out, click OK. And now we're logged off the client. And we're back to our first browser screen. So if I try that again, this time I'm going to try our other user, which was Nick Mason. So nmason is the username. Type in Nick's password and then log in. And now you see that because he's a member of, or rather entitled to the Windows 7 desktop pool, he has an icon for a Windows 7 desktop. So if we click on that, that'll launch now a Windows 7 desktop and log us in as Nick Mason. And again, as with our Windows 10 desktop, you'll see we have the little tab to the left hand side. You see I'm running a Windows 7 desktop, and there's Windows 7 available, and I can do all the other keystrokes as I can before, Control-Delete, cut and paste. So let's log off of there and click OK to log off. I've been disconnected, so I can close that window, and then don't forget I just need to disconnect from the Horizon client. So disconnect, log off, OK. And I'm back at the browser screen. So we talked about this other option, install Horizon client software. This will actually take you to the VMware website where you can download the appropriate client for the device that you're using. So in this case, if I click on there, it's going to take me to the VMware website where I can download the Windows client because it's worked out that I'm on a Windows machine. If I was doing this from a Mac, for example, then that's going to take me to the Mac client and then allow me to download the Mac client. So we won't download that now, we've already pre-downloaded that. So if we go to our folder here, our downloads folder, you can see I've already downloaded the client. So we're just going to install the Horizon client for Windows. There we go, so we click on Run, and then the Horizon client software is going to launch. So here we have the Install Horizon client setup window, and we have two options. We can either do a typical installation, or we can do a custom install. So we're going to do a custom install, and at the same time accept the user license agreement. So with the first option we have here, the advanced settings, is we need to choose the IP protocol for the connection. And as we've set up our connection servers for IPv4, we'll select IPv4 and then click Next. Now we have some other options for USB redirection, so we can choose whether that will be installed. So by default that's installed. Also the option to log in as current user. So what that does is it will log you in as the user that you've logged in as on the endpoint device, rather than ask you again. So we'll leave those as defaults. We click Next. Next we enter the address of the Horizon connection server. This is our hzn7-cs1.pvolab.com. That's our connection server. We click Next, and then we have the option to or set the behavior for the login as current user. So we can show that to allow that to log in as current user, or we can set it as default to log in as the current user. We'll leave that as the options. We don't want to log in as current user because we want to log in as somebody else. And then we have the usual create a shortcut on the desktop and in the Start Menu Programs folder. So we leave those as default, and then we click Next, and finally we're ready to install. So we click the Install button and let the installer kick off its installing. So we're going to copy some files, put some registry settings, install some services, and the usual bits and pieces for an install. So now the install's finished. We click the Finish button. It will ask for a restart, so we'll just pretend we've restarted for now. And you'll see we have an icon now for the VMware Horizon client. So if we double click that to launch, and you'll see this window pop up. And you'll see that we've already got the connection server pre-populated as we did that with the install. If you do the typical install, it won't let you put that detail in. You have to then manually configure that once you launch the client. So if we double click on there, we're going to launch the login box. So we're going to log in with the username. So we've got Bob Cooper here, who's part of the sales group, and his password. And then it's going to come back and say, okay, this guy's got a Windows 10 desktop. And then if we click on the Windows 10 desktop, the connection server is going to prepare that desktop and then create the connection. And as you can see now, Bob Cooper is being logged into a Windows 10 desktop. Rather than the bar at the side, this time we have a bar across the top. So here we have our options. So I can see, about the client. I can do share folders, send, control, alt, delete, disconnect, etc. I can connect a USB drive. Again, I may have set a profile policy that doesn't allow that, so the user wouldn't be able to see those. They'd be grayed out. And I can see that I've got a Windows 10 desktop. So he's happy with that. I'm going to disconnect and log off. Are you sure you want to disconnect and log off? Okay. That'll log me out, and then that'll take me back to my device from which I logged in. So again, if we try that this time with a different user, so let's go for our Windows 7 user, so N Mason, and put his password in there. So as this user is entitled to a Windows 7 desktop, that's what he gets. There's his Windows 7 desktop. So we double click on there, the connection server prepares the desktop, makes the connection, and logs us in as that user for that desktop. Again, you'll see across the top we have the options bar, so help support, we can enable relative mouse, send, control, alt, delete, disconnect, or again via policy we could potentially install or connect a USB drive. So we're just going to disconnect and log off, say OK. And there we have it. So now we've built our desktops, optimized our desktops, entitled users to the desktops, and then shown you how you can actually then log into the desktop and use it.